we are literally building this amazing US-China technology unicorn model that combines the best from both countries. We're talking about technology, inspiration, innovation, creativity that we have.
Venture Out Loud, where we have candid conversations on running a venture capital firm, as well as investing in founders, planning for profits around a purpose, and making a positive impact through entrepreneurship. I'm Navin Goyal, your host and CEO of LOUD Capital here in Columbus, Ohio. Today's episode is, well, I want to say every episode is special, but today's extra special because it's global. We have today my partner, Ryan Retcher of LOUD Capital, and Ethan Huang of LOUD Capital, who resides in Beijing. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's really great to have you. Ethan, we're going to just jump in. And first of all, how do we have the pleasure in this crazy pandemic world of having you all the way from Beijing to here? Maybe tell us a little bit about how you made it here.
Well, it's certainly not an easy process. As everyone knows, that the pandemic has changed so much going on over there and put lots of travel restriction. But for me, I feel it's very necessary to make this trip happen. Not just because I have not seen everybody for about close to 2 years, since 2019, when we all had the delegation visit over in China, but also we have some great progress with certain international projects. And that's why I actually made a commitment. Definitely make the trip come up here to meet up with all the partners to push work forward.
So to reiterate, I'm basically going to say, look, Ethan has been a part of LOUD Capital for a few years now, but he has what we call resides on an island. And so he's away from our big group over here. We all are personable, energetic folks, and he's been doing a lot of work on his own in China. And so for him to come here is awesome for us, but how does it make you feel? You know, going from working alone every single day and the office that, you know, what you've expressed is a little bit lonely, but tell me a little bit about how it feels to be here and what you're reminded of.
Well, I'll probably use the term that Chinese prefer, the comradeship, right? I'm not like people around me when I'm working in Beijing, but it's not the same when you are actually surrounded with partners who we have to build the history, the sense of ownership, sense of commitment. And we know where we are going with the LOUD Capital and its global vision. I miss that type of atmosphere and also the team dynamic. And I do feel a lot of the productivity, inspirations, and progress really come out of the good team environment compared to the just client or business relationship type of people over in China.
And my man Ryan's here, as I mentioned earlier. Ryan, when we're talking about China, global, anything when it comes to entrepreneurship, what are a couple of things that come to mind?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about China here in the US, and there's a lot of misconceptions about the US over in China. And I've traveled over there a couple of times, and it's been this just massive learning experience and absorption of culture, and really eye-opening from the perspective of my U.S., I'll call them biases, about what China is and what opportunities and what threats and those type of things that are there. And my whole dynamic and perspective has been changed through those opportunities and connecting with real people there. The narratives, I think, that we are kind of told and that they're probably told over there in general can be, I think, magnified to a point where until you actually meet someone or meet people that challenges those biases, it's hard to overcome them.
Yeah, and that's, I went on my first trip to China a few years back, and Ryan was with me, and I want to say I feel the same way. I read the paper, I read a lot of articles. I try to be a well-informed person. However, there is always, limited perspectives that we read or hear about or experience until you truly experience it for yourself. And in the end, it's your experience by going yourself and visualizing and having your own conversations, not reading about a conversation that someone else was having. So those are things that really opened up my eyes. And one of the specific things that I remember is meeting some young folks over there that were so excited about building and creating and excited for the future, just like the young folks are over here. And that is obviously a very common element that I didn't read about. I didn't read about the young folks that are just entrepreneurial and so excited about problem solving or, taking what they're very passionate about and driving it to a bigger vision and coming internationally to the States or some European country. Like those were not things that were entering my mind when I'm thinking about a young student in China.
Absolutely right, Navin. Growing up in a multilingual, multinational type of background, I certainly had the privilege to experience what United States and China have to offer. And I understand, particularly during the past couple of years, the international political weather, how China is often not portrayed being the favored country to work with. In reality, despite of those tend to be more negative side of the information and influence, there's no way to deny that China, among all the emerging countries, still holds some of the strongest resource that we need to pay attention to, such as the most robust, most complete supply chains. We are talking about the fastest production speed. We are talking about one of the most vibrant consumer market in the world, even during the pandemic time. All these actually have to force us to think that with all this great resource in front of us, how can we establish that collaboration and take the benefit of these resources in a very clever way, instead of always going with the public view and belief.
What if I'm just skeptical? What if I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, this Ethan guy is from China. He's coming here. He's proud, like I'm a proud American over here. And I'm obviously going to brag about amazing things. And in the end, I come from a powerful country and I just want to continue telling all the good stuff. Do you have experience in the US or experience living or working in America? Because we haven't even gone into your background.
That is true. That's true. Maybe I should actually start by just sharing some of my background over here. Prior to my career with LOUD, I had the fortune to work with the McKinsey & Company, Accenture, a few management consulting firms. Our job was to serve Fortune 200 companies. And over the years, I had the opportunity to build my expertise in the business strategy, human resource, supply chain, and also organization performance. That background also helped me to understand how international business are usually conducted under very different circumstance and environment. And you are correct, talking about that each country holds this very pride perception about how they view their own country. In my opinion, how we position ourselves in the United States, very often if you're able to take it away from the context that we are familiar with, and particularly with a different market perspective like China, I don't think it's that difficult to figure it out. There are certain opportunities and advantage. If we're able to capture that, we'll be able to raise our competitive edge almost at a global level. And that's where I believe the secret to enhance our differentiation, as talking about LOUD as the organization in general, being in the United States.
So yeah, before we jump into how we look at a global strategy and benefits to it, just to reiterate, so Ethan, you worked in multiple management consulting opportunities, and that was here in the US, correct?
That is correct.
And how many years did you live in the United States?
Counting that, coming close to almost 30.
Wow. Okay.
Live on that.
So 30 years in the United States.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and you owned a few businesses as well?
That is correct.
Okay. So I'm shaping this here so everyone listening can understand that Ethan worked here for a long time, owned businesses, ran businesses, worked with executives, very large companies. and then moved to mainland China because you were born in Taiwan. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you've been living in mainland China for how long?
Mainland China only for the past 3 years, I believe,
Okay.
3 or 4 years.
Okay. So I would say you have a relatively Western trained mind that's perhaps now in mainland China. And so you probably have a different perspective or vantage point from someone who was born and raised in China and perhaps never lived anywhere else.
Absolutely. Although I'm talking about a full-time living in China for only 3 or 4 years, but my business trip and business contact with China had started way before that, which actually allowed me to consider China market always part of my strategy.
Okay. And so now if you had to simply say to people who are happy and comfortable here in the US, I'm running a business or interested in a business, and all I read about is the difficulty and the China-US relations and why even mess with it. What are things that people should know that they probably don't know? If I'm thinking logically or creatively or long-term as a business strategy, why should we even be talking about things in China? Not as a threat, but as an opportunity, right? Like that's because we usually hear, oh my gosh, like let's just stay in your lane. You know, knowing what we know and we have experienced together, what should we be sharing to people?
I think that's a basic and outstanding question there, Navin. I'll use a few examples to illustrate the concept. If we are in the technology field, all the technology company here in the United States, they do possess the advantage of very strong innovation, R&D, etc. But the matter of fact is, no matter how great the technology is, the application of the technology is what we are all looking for, including the field of the investment industry, right? This is why we believe certain technology company can become the unicorn of the future, because it's going to be recognized by the market, and the value is also being recognized by the consumer. And therefore, I do believe that the commercialization is the key to a lot of the technology research that we are very proud of here in the United States. China offers that type of opportunity, not just in terms of the volume, but also the speed. Take, for example, you guys are very familiar with, like Tesla is able to finish its Shanghai factory production within only 12 months, compared to its US factory takes about 3 times longer. And that is the China speed we are talking about. And also it was able to reach 1,000 vehicle production per week in merely 3 or 4 months. When we take this into consideration without the political side of the interpretation, it is not hard for US business to understand. There are certain advantages over in China if we're able to consider that part of the integration of what we are already doing well. We are literally building this amazing US-China technology unicorn model that combines the best from both countries. We're talking about technology, inspiration, innovation, creativity that we have, plus China's massive market, supply chain, manufacturing, and also the consumer market. To me, that is the winning formula if the business and the business owner are willing to explore that direction and consider that part of a strategy.
So that's great. And I think Tesla's a great example because Tesla did really, get this factory behemoth built in Shanghai in a very efficient manner. And, I know China put up the capital to build it. And so from a company standpoint, it was an easier decision. It's not like this big capital investment that you have to do globally. But, Ryan, I'm going to hear your perspective real quick. I am a factory worker. I actually work in the Tesla factory in California right now. And I'm hearing this discussion. And what Ethan just said was, hey, there's this amazing factory that also just got built in Shanghai in less than 12 months. And the output of Teslas over there is really high as well. So now we have Teslas coming out of Cali, out of Shanghai. How should I take this as a positive? If I'm a worker here that obviously supporting my family, I worked hard, why should I be excited or really interested in really continuing this conversation?
Well, I think the natural reaction is viewing it as competition. and the competitive juices of, well, American labor, Chinese labor, and automatically viewing that as a negative proposition, that they're doing this in China, they're doing it faster, cheaper. I don't know about better, obviously, but they're certainly doing it faster and cheaper. Instead of thinking about it in a competitive standpoint, they're taking my jobs. They're taking. Well, what could they give us? What could they give us? What could that opportunity give us? And that opportunity could give us more opportunities to do what we do really well. And that could give the company more capital by selling more cars globally, to do more things here in the US. And if we just start looking for these type of things, looking for how we better use our strengths, as Ethan was talking about, as our cultures, as our societies, and figure out that formula of the best of both worlds. They do what they do really well over in China. We do what we do really well over here in the US. How can we make this a win-win proposition? I know I'm speaking in utopian language here, but just using this analogy, this is what I see in real applications of what we're doing with US companies going to China and Chinese companies that we're helping come to the US and commercialize. If we all just look for that win-win scenario, then we can win more versus looking at always the downside and what are they taking. And, really, I almost see it as looking at the worst caricature of the other side and just pinning that assumption on them, no matter what the circumstances are. And when we do that, we lose out on those opportunities to realize something better for ourselves and for them.
Now, that's very well put. I do have to make this statement that although I do have the Chinese background, I'm an American citizen first. And purely from the business perspective, I understand the earlier popular debate about this job versus China versus United States. However, I do encourage we all look at it within a little bit bigger context. For example, U.S. company actually move their manufacturing to China because they are able to produce something that creates a larger profit margin. And that's beneficial to U.S. business, first of all.
Agreed.
That is a boost for the economy because we are becoming more competitive in terms of a global presence. And number two, not only so, it benefits our consumers. Look at how many things are being made out there in China these days that we are enjoying every day. We don't have to talk about China per se. There's a lot of things made in India, made in other countries that we're enjoying the benefit that each country has to offer. This is where the free trade global economy is all about. I'm pretty sure if we dictate that everything has to be made in the United States, our living expense will probably go up multiple times simply because we want to actually have everything manufactured in the United States. And we all know United States, in many ways, that the manufacturing is not the core of its modern business. We are actually more advanced into service business, as we know. And finally, I do want to mention this reverse trend. You're going to realize there are more and more Chinese companies coming to United States for IPO, right? And a lot of them bring their factories moving over to United States, what we call the factory forward concept. Being in Ohio over here, we know, for example, Fuyao Auto Glass is a very good example. And I do foresee we're going to have more and more of the Chinese company when they become global coming to United States to actually offer that advanced manufacturing will also be equally attractive in terms of getting back to the economy.
And that's one thing that I've learned in the last year of what the intentions of a lot of these companies coming from China. What do they want? If you watch a few Netflix series, if you watch a few, read a couple articles, it's just scary stuff like ghost companies coming over here and going public. Now, has that happened? Absolutely. Has there been other things that have happened? Yes. There are actually a lot of companies that we're in talks with and Loud Capital with regards to what certain large companies over there want from the US. So they also want exposure to the market over here. They like the brands and the front end, the people, the culture, the services, and what, Ethan just said, the service industry. And so if you really think about what that entails communication, culture. I want to call it, there's a hip factor that Americans are looked upon as, and that's not just from China, that's from a lot of different areas around the world. And I think that people need to hear this more, because we only have these kind of feared, what are people taking away from us versus why do people still want to come here? What are people still looking to America for to help them launch? And so, just to, again, in a simple way, Ethan, what do Americans need to hear that they don't hear enough? Where I'm a Chinese company and I'm a behemoth, I'm making a lot of money, I'm making great products. Why do I still care to come into America or connect with people in America? Why?
That's an outstanding question. To briefly understand or to answer that question, we need to quickly review how China get to where it is right now. And even for very common people out there, we all know that China has carried a reputation being the world factory for the ever since almost 1980s.
Yep.
Right? It certainly reached its peak after the 2000. And China had all its advantage in terms of labor, material, will be able to offer that type of scale of the production for to be the world factory. However, China as a country also realized that just relying on manufacturing and export is not enough to sustain the economy of the country that's fast moving forward to the modern era, right? And therefore, you can actually see the trend right now. Lots of the more basic commodity stuff, such as clothing, shoes, umbrella, this type of household items, China actually is reducing its manufacturing in terms of a scale in those areas. And because the labor cost has gone up quite a bit. So a lot of these basic manufacturing have gone to Southeast Asian countries, such as Vietnam. And what China is currently trying to reposition itself definitely is more to be more technology oriented rather than labor oriented industry transition. And for those very successful big companies, like you said, from China, they want to come to the United States because we have something they don't have. I'm talking about how to actually function in a free market with a very strong branding management. If you have been actually working as a manufacturer, you know how to operate a factory. But how do you create a brand that can be recognized by international players? That is still one thing that China is so far away. So these big companies, if you recognize why they want to explore overseas opportunity, particularly in the United States, because we have the most valuable talent over here in terms of building brands.
So I would say there is large successful companies in China that still really haven't navigated a free market. And until you really do that, then you really aren't this global package or really have your services or your products that can succeed in different economies or markets. And so that was a light bulb moment for me when we were discussing this earlier in the year, that sometimes I looked upon these large companies in China. I'm like, what more do they need?
Exactly.
But it's actually, there's actually a lot more. And there's now a healthy competition between companies in China, just like there is competition here. How do I get not only to more people, but how do I navigate other markets and economies and spread my technology to more people? Or if I'm helping or solve this problem, if I'm only solving the problem in my backyard and not applying it to others who can benefit from it, what am I really doing here? And so this healthy competition has started from the Chinese aspect. And one more thing I want to mention that I don't think was obvious until I went over there was I still saw China as, a lot of the labor market, but that's no longer the case. They're actually now offloading that to other countries. And so they're using cheaper labor to do things. And so that's kind of like maybe step one in building your foundation or economy. And then you go to where China is right now, which is technology and processes. And so now it's not about labor. It's about the next level things. And so these are things that I've slowly learned about that I think would be helpful to other people.
Yes, the transition from a manufacturing based economy to consumer market driven economy, I would say is the biggest transition right now that I witnessed over in China. The consumer market we are seeing here right now did not exist 10 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
So that's all they could rely on was their basic manufacturing. But once they switch to the more consumer market side of the growth, guess what? People want more. People want to actually see the value of the brand. People want to start learning how to create a fabulous business with entrepreneurship. That is also the area I do believe why we have been trying to position ourselves over in China by bringing that spirit of entrepreneurship, innovation. Being the VC firm over here is not enough. We are creating that impact overseas too. And through the collaboration with business over there, we are also empowering those young entrepreneurs, just like you mentioned earlier, Navin, how they can actually look up to what US has done the best, which is actually this part of the innovation in terms of the investment, what venture capital can do to empower people in business.
Yeah, and I'll kind of end on, as I've experienced over there, they're hungry to learn from us. Those entrepreneurs over there, they realize where they're at and that they have a lot to learn. And, for us Americans over here, I think it's really important to understand where China's at as an economy. As I've witnessed it, the most parallel thing I can equate it to is America in post-World War II, 50s and 60s. That boom that we saw here in that creation and massive growth of the middle class here, that's where China's at today. And so they are really just discovering consumerism for the first time. And consumerism means across all industries. So every aspect of life, they are hungry for these type of things. So as Americans, that's something that is a part of our history as we've grown through that. You can just imagine what opportunities there are to fill those needs, to fill the voids of those consumer products, the services, and things that we've really just experience and feel as normal life here today. It's all new and fresh to them over there. So
absolutely,
there's
absolutely
a lot of hunger.
So the demand for exploring beyond China, the desire to actually access more brands, the desire to become more in control of your wealth, the desire to become the entrepreneur. All these are really vibrant message that I witness on a daily basis.
Yeah. So in conclusion, if you're listening out there, have never been to China or never been to other countries, but you read about them and you have a perspective, whether it's positive, negative, or let's say it's considered balanced, I would say try to make the trip if you can to this place. Look for it yourself. Look at it yourself. Look around yourself. Talk to people yourself. Now, what if this trip is far away? You don't have time. You don't have money. Talk to people who have been there, right? We tend to rely on journalists and people who are paid or it's their job to travel somewhere and give observations. But just like if you go to a restaurant yourself and you have a different experience than the critic who got there and had an amazing experience, right? It's really about your perspective. And so learning from other people can be an economical and efficient way to learn about their economy. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're just a person who wants to continue learning and problem solve, learn about other places outside of our great borders. I mean, we have a great country here, but I'll tell you, every country has its own gems and great people. And if you are a person who wants to connect the dots and get the best bang for your buck and for your time, utilize the best of other things and other people, and then you can really problem solve on a whole nother level. So in conclusion, this is about a candid conversation talking about a global strategy from educating yourself to building your business to having an impact on people and society. It is a no-brainer to start thinking globally. Don't let anyone stop you from thinking it or doing anything to learn for yourself. I hope this has contributed something in your learning journey, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you, Ryan and Ethan, for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.